G'day, legends. I hope that you're having a fantastic day. And I hope if you're an Aussie, you had a fantastic long weekend as well. Now, some noticed last video, not the interview, but the last update, I actually have a new tie. So this is my new tie. I like it. It's nice. But today we have a lot to go over, but it won't be too long. So regardless of your bias, we have bad news about fighter aircraft everywhere. We need to talk about France and people saying that this is a shock, and I don't keep up with French politics at all, but I'm not shocked by this. I don't think anyone should be shocked by what we have seen. We need to look at the maps, and we'll look at the maps over then 2 days, and we need to have a look at some claims coming out about a new northern Russian offensive opening up by the leader of the Chechen Akhmat Special Forces, Kadyrov, and have a look and maybe a little bit deeper there as well. But that is just all very interesting, and well, let's get stuck into it, and we will talk about the area on the map. So here we have Ukraine in the center, the capital of Kyiv, of course. Here we have the red areas occupied since 2022, the purple since 2014. Now, some interesting things of which you're keeping up with if you're watching me is we know Russia a month ago, basically today, launched the two-pronged offensive from Belgorod into Kharkiv here. It has really looked like it has stalled out, holding in place. Now, there's a lot of claims both ways about what's happening here, but no maps are showing much movement here. We know there's been a mass deployment of Ukrainian troops back into this area, and that Russia is having some success down in the east. We'll look at more specifics on that. But what we have talked about and what the problem could be is if Russia then open another front line, and many have said they're expecting it somewhere from Kursk into Sumy region here, of course, what then borders Kharkiv. And it looks like from reports, this is what we are seeing. So, of course, we have the Sumy Oblast up here. Now, we will just zoom in on this, and we have this Tyatkino here and this Rizhivka sitting right here. Now, this is where it is said that here is now under occupation. So let's look at the claims, and let's look at a little bit more in here. Now, this was a Noel Reports map here. Now, there has been reports as well from Ukraine saying, no, this isn't occupied, but again, we'll wait for more to come. It's sort of up in the air at the moment. No, I'm not ignoring the SU-57. We're just going to talk, this is more burning news as far as frontline. So Rizhivka, this is the area of which we're talking about, is in question. Now, Kadyrov released on his Telegram to 2 million people. My Telegram's only 10,000. Come and join my Telegram if you'd like. But friends, soldiers of Akhmat Chechnya Regiment with the RF Ministry of Defense under the command of dear brother Aslamabek Saleev, together with the military personnel of other Russian units, carried out tactical actions and liberated another populated area from the enemy. This is the village of Rizhivka, which is located on the border of the Kursk region. As a result, large-scale planned offensive actions, the Ukrainian side suffered significant losses and was forced to retreat. The coordinated and effective work of fighters, more units made to achieve this result. I sincerely thank every soldier participating in the assault and liberation of the village. I'm convinced the same ending awaits territories temporal, but the yoke of Ukraine, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, we know this, and it released then a video then with it here, some mortars firing, some drone footage, whatever. You can go and watch that. I'll put that on my Telegram if you'd like to watch. Now, a part of that was then geolocated to just in here. But the thing is, no one gave what part of the footage, so it's hard to know, because if it's mortars here, we know then the front line's working a lot further out. But if we just have a look at where these roads are, so we're on this fourth road in from the north, so just about here. So we do know there has been some crossing. Now, these crossings, and I've spoken about the people in the north here as well, and I know people say this is cope, but I still believe that Russia's key objectives are still in the south and the east, and that these are a deception plan to try and draw units away. And we have seen many units redeploy into here, put significant pressure on the Russians here. We may have to see a redeployment of soldiers up into here as well, and not to sort of get like goggles trapped, isolated on looking at that area. But that is very interesting to see that. Now, the Akhmat guys, special forces, TikTok brigades, whatever you want to call them, have been taking a lot of the piss throughout this war. And a lot of it is completely legitimate as well. We know they're fighting in other areas, but
let's have a look at what the RUSI, the Royal United Services Institute, has said about the Chechens. The Chechen fighters on TikTok, comic as much as it does tragic to Western audiences, people do miss the hidden influence operating in Muslim countries, push a romantic image of Kadyrov as a defender of Islam opposing Western rhetorics. This has been helped by popular MMA fighters, influence their international fans and country's elite. And of course, this has been greatly exacerbated by what we're seeing in Israel, Gaza, and other areas. So this, like with everything, you need to look then outside of the box of what's happening, where the influence may sit, where propaganda may sit, and all of that. We know the unconventional strategy of Russia is to paint Russia as a bastion of traditionalist values, the nuclear family, things like this. That's part of their unconventional warfare through other areas of the world. And just because you see something as a piss take online, remember how it may be seen in other areas around the world. So that is very interesting to see what is then happening up into the north. Now, let's talk about fighter aircraft, the images, the claims, whatever. Now, there is claims coming out from Ukraine saying that actually a second Su-57 may have been damaged or destroyed in the attack, but we don't have any visual evidence of that. So let's talk about where this was. So it was at this airbase out here that sits I believe, about 600 kilometers away from Ukraine. Let's measure the distance. So to at least non-occupied territory, yes, something around that mark. Now, what we got last night was this, last night Australia time, this photograph come out. So this on the 7th of a Su-57, and then this on the 8th, looking like two potential impacts. Now, we'll have a bit of an analyze of this video in a second, but then the GUR put this up. Su-57 was hit for then the first time. Now, this was then very quickly confirmed, actually, by fighter bomber. Yes, yesterday an airfield was attacked by UAV, so a drone. 3 pieces arrived. Su-57 was damaged by shrapnel. It is now being determined whether it can be restored or not. If not, then this will be the first combat loss of a Su-57 in history. I'll tell you again, for the price of a Su-57 alone, shelters from UAVs could be built for PTA aircraft in the country. Of course, if you don't bully them along the way, you don't have to give out kickbacks. So talking about corruption there. And there'd still be some left for Laos. So again, this is a big loss here. Now, is this damaged, destroyed? Well, we really don't know. How much are these operating in the conflict in Ukraine, the war? Well, we don't know. But we do know things like the KH-69 missile. They were developed specifically for this platform, and that these platforms are operating in distances of what we know Ukraine drones and or attackams could reach on some airfields. So what I would say is, if these were not participating in the conflict, why would they be anywhere? They'd be on the complete other side of the country. These are an incredibly expensive and incredibly important aircraft. Now, how many of these has Russia got? About 22. We don't know how many are actually flying in the air at any one time. That's actually with any air asset. I actually had coffee with a friend in the Air Force yesterday. He's like, when you have aircraft, just divide it by 2, and that's how many are actually flight worthy at the time for maintenance, deep maintenance, all of that. Now, one thing I'll say in this photograph is, yeah, it does tend to look off, but again, it's been confirmed here, so I don't know. But one thing I will say is, for how damaged is this, we do know Gen 4.5, Gen 5, depending on this, what you want to classify as aircraft, these are a very sensitive aircraft. A lot of computers and a lot of single pieces of material to make the body. Now, what I'm talking about is, you say an F-18 or an F-16 hits a bird, they can replace singular panels, bits and pieces. If an F-35 does, that's a massive, massive deal due to how then the airframe, the hull is made. But we can see that it doesn't look like it has caught on fire. And I guess that would be one of the big ones to say that everything was destroyed. So will parts of this be salvageable? Maybe engines, maybe bits of the cockpit, radars. Again, I'm no bloody aircraft guy, but don't downplay this. This is a big loss of an aircraft like this, and the first generation of this craft that we've actually seen destroyed. And I guess we do know that they may or may not be participating in the conflict. We don't know. We know Russia's had problems actually getting those aircraft then into production as well. But I will say, and I always say this, that these are a stunning aircraft. What we need is Lockheed engineers bloody who's the company that built the Sukhoi designed the outside. It looks better than F-35, but I don't know how the performance in the air. But what I'm talking about is see how this is sort of all one panel here. This is what causes massive damage if there is even like a bird strike or drone or shrapnel onto something like this. So it could be completely XX destroyed, but again, we are not really sure. Now, again, there is even more bad news coming out than for the F-16s. So this is the wrong one. Here we go. Total of this from Politico, but referencing the ISW spoke about the other day. A total of 20 Ukrainian F-16 pilots are expected to graduate by the end of this year. Half of the 40 needed to operate a full squadron of 20 jets. Now, I know many people hanging their hat on any week now. We're expecting F-16s in the air and flying to like the full amount. And we're not sure what has happened there. I've got some running theories and I'm trying to use like Occam's razor to be like, what is the most likely issue for this? And the excuse that the Americans can't train more than 12 pilots at once, whatever they're putting out, we know that's bullshit because of how many pilots America put through training. So we're not really sure, but US officials have warned for months the F-16 will not make a huge difference on the battlefield, from Air Force Secretary Frank Kendall last year. While the jets will give the Ukrainians an increment of capability that they don't have right now, it's not going to be a dramatic game changer as far as I'm concerned for their total military capabilities. And I think that these ideas of it was going to be any week now on the front line, I sort of think, was that true at one point? And then there might have been some final testing and people got that it's not ready to go yet. Again, we're not 100% sure what has happened here, and there's definitely been some problems because this isn't what was being said or what I guess was getting expected. At this rate, Ukraine won't have a full squadron of trained pilots until the end of 2025. So remember, a full squadron is 40 pilots, 20 jets. Another issue is the weapons the plane are carrying. Now, this is what we spoke about a while back, of that the fighter aircraft, these days, it's not guns and we're too close for missiles switching to guns, dogfighting in the air. That is gone. Even if we'd like to see how one of these would perform against a flanker in a fight like that, most likely we're not going to see that. But that these are basically a taxi for munitions into areas. Now, Ukrainians plan to use the jets to knock down Russian cruise missiles and ballistic missiles fired towards Ukrainian infrastructure and civilian targets. Those missions require precise air-to-air missiles that belong to the US and dozens of NATO allies. Many of the countries are hesitant to part with their expensive weapons. The production capacity for AIM-120 advanced medium air-to-air missile made by RTX has increased from about 500 to 800 per year to over 1,000. I will say, gearing up for war, I think every single item from shells to bullets to recruiting men to AIM bloody 120s needs to be increased massively. If we are having problems on a war that is still localized between two nations, well, for God's sake. But the worry from capitals is that the new request from Kyiv could begin to put a strain on the country's stocks. So that will be very, very interesting to see how that then unfolds. And I know a lot of people are very disappointed, expecting to see those F-16s any day now, like this month. And we may not see them operate until the end of the year. Even then, if there's not a full squadron, how will that then work? Again, we don't know. Now, Ukraine today, speaking with Sky News, has said that a warplane has fired a weapon at a target inside Russia for its first time. Damage assessment is still ongoing. It's confirmed as a direct hit from a military source telling Sky News. Now, of course, firing a weapon inside Russia of these planes as something new, but we don't have any footage of what then was hit. So at this point, it is a claim. And we do know as well, and I've spoken a little bit about this, about how much effect will these have. And we need to look at the successes and failures Russia has had to have a look at maybe what will happen here. Now, at some point, if Ukraine want to achieve their goals of victory, they're going to have to break through deep, heavy defensive lines. And I'll bring these up here. They're going to have to smash through this. Now, let's have a look at what has succeeded for Russia. The FAB glide bombs. They're cheap, a hell of a lot of bang, got a lot of them, can drop them well behind the line. And these goals, they're going to require a breakthrough of heavily defended deep lines. And the amount of munitions that it's actually going to take to do this is going to be too expensive or too numerous to rely on modern, technologically advanced weapon systems. And will Ukraine have to then come to something like a fab like the Russians have been using and has been successful for the Russians. Now, I've been thinking about this for a couple of weeks and like, well, what would be the best maybe platform? And would something like a RAF Tornado or something like that be a better platform if that was to go in? Now, only today, as I was researching other stuff, this came out as well. Soon the Air Force of the Ukrainian Armed Forces will begin testing Ukrainian-made guided bombs. And this sounds a lot like then a glide bomb. We're also currently working on the conversion and creation of our adjusted aerial bombs based on ordinary free-falling ones. There are some constructive nuances. You need to choose a wing GPS module as well as control module in a few weeks. We should start the firing test of the first batches of such bombs already Ukrainian. So this will be interesting, domestically produced, so getting away from some of the other problems and maybe then used to break through some areas on the line. That said, the glide bombs have to come, well, the planes have to come a lot closer, putting them in a hell of a lot of danger in the air. But one thing I want to put on this is one of my dreams, like lifelong goals, is to go in a fighter aircraft, and I don't care whose, I just want to go in a fighter aircraft. Now, depending on how the economy will be running after this, the Russian economy, whenever the war ends, they do flights in MiG-29s and shit. 12,000 euro, I can never afford that in my life. But let's hope that this sinks right down, and I'd love to fly in something like that. Bloody no one would ever let me in one, maybe other than I'm never going to get in an Air Force one. I don't think I'd pass the medical examination. But let's then have a look at then the maps. And there has been some interesting updates. Now we're going to start on the map update yesterday, and then we'll move forward till today. So you know these areas, but we'll come down Donetsk Oblast, and we actually do see an interesting change just down in here, out from the east of Vuhledar on this map. The Russians made some advancement out here, but I can't confirm that amongst any other maps. So we know the ties between Deep State and then the Ukrainian MOD, that any map movement on this we can say is backed by official stuff. So there has been some shift there. And then an interesting change, if we just come up north into Bakhmut, we do see then this, that the majority of this eastern part of Chasiv Yar, remember this is Chasiv Yar here, but this far eastern part has then come under Russian control. Now there's a lot of heavy fighting in here, and then this is confirmed by a geolocation. So we see where this road comes down just on the corner here. We have a geolocation of a Russian flag being flown here. So that is where this is geolocated to. This guy then putting it up, but you can see the complete destruction of these areas. A friction point is going to be this waterway running through here, and it's going to be a friction point both ways. We know there's been a lot, like everything is down in here as far as bridges, crossings, whatever, a lot of strikes against those. And Ukraine, if they do withdraw, any other crossings will be likely taken out as well. But will be the Ukrainian withdrawal back across this, as well as Russia's advancement across this. Anything like this is a big friction point. Open ground, you've got to cross something there. But that is interesting. Now, there's no other changes on this map. No other changes in the north are shown even up till then. Today, it's interesting that no changes are being seen on any of the north on here. But then we'll work our way down the map, as we do have some updates from Noel reports to look at as well. So we come into this north sector here, this Berestov, Sinkivka, Kislivka front. We talk a lot about this, and we have speculated, could there be some push on Kupiansk if there was a large Russian offensive again? And I'm still not convinced that we're going to see this all-out offensive. But Noel reports here between Kislivka and Ivanivka, here we have, has then closed up this territory here, being shown the same then on then the Deep State. But just to keep you all in the loop, then nothing down here, nothing down until we get to then what I'll call the Seversk front and Rozdelivka here. We have a Ukrainian, here we go, the Noel reports map update in here. So we can see this is Rozdelivka, Krasnopolivka. So across here, basically where this is shown as grey zone, is showing that this is now closed up by the Russian forces in just to the south of Rozdelivka across here. So quick update in there. Now again, I will say Syriac is off just on some leave, so we don't have any of his, but I guess we'll get a lot of updates on him. No changes shown around Chasiv Yar today, but then we come down to the Avdiivka front, and we do see out from Osheretny a continuation of expansion of control here out further towards then the west, and this is an interesting expansion that we've seen, and this this flare has continued more and more here, and this does put pressure into the north areas. Of course, it puts pressure on this road connecting then up into Sloviansk, Kramatorsk area and other areas out into Pokrovsk as well. And this has been expanding, and there hasn't really been a stoppage of Russian movement here beyond then the first line fell, and then it's putting pressure on the second line. We can see a small advancement out from Umansky here as well, and this is then double from Noel reports here out from Umansk, but showing basically the same as then the deep state and closing up more of the pressure in and around this front in here. Now, just as I was looking, I actually have missed something up in the north. Now, no change on this map, but Noel reports is saying in Holoboki here, there has been a pushback from the Ukrainian forces in here as well. So basically liberating this area. You can see where these roads run, so just in here, but it has not been updated on this map here. But that is all the map updates we have today down the front line. Now, there's a lot of speculation that from Krinky, the Ukrainian forces have actually left the left bank and have pushed across to the right. No maps and no one I typically follow is saying this, but I'm hearing a lot of speculation on that from contacts of mine as well. So again, hold out on anything like that. But I think the main area that's going to be very interesting is Sumy Oblast and the north here. This does create a lot of issues. Now, let's then talk about France. Now, we know France has been one of the biggest supporters of Ukraine and wanting to more and more talk about putting troops on the ground, more strikes, whatever. But I will say as well, then French hasn't really backed that up with the weapons going in. Like, we haven't seen France deploy Leclerc tanks to Ukraine. We haven't seen say, you know, well, we want to give you Rafale fighter jets. We haven't seen any of that. So it's sort of like, well, put your money where your mouth is. You know, before you're deploying troops, give us some of those weapon systems, some of the more modern stuff, maybe first. But there has been an election, and one of my guys who's actually French has sort of sent me this across. Now, what we'll have a look at, and you'll see this map floating around a lot. Now, the brownie red on this map, this is the right-wing party that has won overwhelmingly in areas. Matt, I mentioned before that Macron was facing a very difficult European election. Well, his party came second with just 14.5%, less than half of what the Rassemblement National, or RN National Rally, got at 31.5. Those results aren't quite final yet, but surely very close to the final ones. It's so bad that Macron decided to dissolve the National Assembly, the lower but more important house of the French Parliament, meaning new elections will take place on the 30th of June and 7th of July. Constitutionally, this changes nothing regarding the war in Ukraine, as he retains full authority over the armed forces no matter what. But he might have to name a prime minister from a different party, and he'll have to think very carefully about his political capital and how to spend it. I don't know what the outcome of these early elections will be. This is a situation the Fifth Republic has never faced, because the mainstream right-wing party, these, and the mainstream left-wing party used to dominate French politics, but the former or the latter would win the elections and get rule. So the former or the latter would win the elections and get rule. This is no longer the case. The National Rally is unlikely to get an absolute majority in the Assembly, and Macron's party is unlikely to get it either. This is unprecedented in French politics, at least in the current regime. So there's big changes happening in France. I asked him some more about like what would the effect on Ukraine be, and he said, well, no, the RN National Rally, they at least publicly are saying that they, support Ukraine, but there may be some pullback there as well. But it is going to have, of course, a lot of domestic changes in France as well. And Macron may have to look internally and go, right, what is happening that is unpopular here? And I guess you guys can figure out yourselves what is happening in France. But this came out from The Guardian too. French President Emmanuel Macron and US President Joe Biden have aligned their country's support for Ukraine in opposition to Russia during Biden's state visit. A joint roadmap released by the presidents included a commitment to support efforts to use frozen Russian assets to help Kyiv. So not that money that is frozen, but whatever money is created on top of that, then that can go through to Ukraine. And many people have pointed at problems happening here, and then could it undermine things like the euro, the pound, the dollar for foreign investment, especially people talking Chinese money. Tapping profits from Russian assets has drawn concerns from countries, but a US Treasury official said this week that the US and G7 partners were making progress. Biden said if Putin succeeds in this war with Ukraine, that he will not stop there. It's about much more than Ukraine. Again, this is being pushed and pushed and pushed, but we just don't see that being the reality on the ground. If Putin could, even if he wanted to, and push through here, the military might is not there. It's just not existent. And again, even if you believe every word that comes out of Putin, well, then he hasn't said that either. So I believe both sides, we talk about this every time. Either way you look at this, the Russian military doesn't have the power to push through anywhere in NATO. And on the other side, if you believe Putin, he has not said that he wants to do that either. It's about much more than Ukraine. All of Europe will be threatened. But we're not going to let that happen. The United States is standing strong with Ukraine. We're standing with our allies, and we're standing with France. Well, I guess you could train more than 12 pilots at once. But it is an interesting wording. I don't know if it is the best way to get support saying that Russia has goals to threaten the rest of Europe, because I don't think critical thinkers believe it. People go, well, they're struggling in the east of Ukraine. They haven't captured areas of which they wanted to now 2.5 years into the war. But regardless, legends, that is it for today. I hope that you're having a great day and that I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.